It started on the night that was supposed to be mine. 35. Not a milestone, not a crisis point. Just a round number that felt like it deserved something quieter than a bar and louder than a dinner table. So I booked an old theater in Portland. A place with charm, where the wallpaper peeled just enough to feel nostalgic and the sound system still worked well enough to hum along with a live jazz trio. My plan was simple. A small crowd, some lights, a projector looping clips from old home movies and college days, then a toast or two. Nothing extravagant, just warm. I wanted to celebrate the people who stayed in my life, not spotlight myself. That was the idea. But then the night began, and it quickly stopped feeling like a celebration. I had just stepped away from the bar, cranberry soda in one hand, my phone in the other, glancing at a message from my brother who said he'd be late, when I spotted Hannah talking to the venue manager near the footlights. It wasn't unusual for her to be handling logistics. She liked planning, she liked running things, and she especially liked it when other people noticed how good she was at it. What caught my eye wasn't the conversation, it was the pause. The flicker of something between the two of them. The venue manager, a tall, middle-aged woman in a navy turtleneck and headset, leaned in and handed Hannah something discreetly. It was a card. No envelope. Just a hotel key card, one of those cheap, branded cardboard sleeves they give you at boutique hotels downtown. Stuck inside was a folded receipt with the kind of long, narrow printout you recognize immediately, breakfast charges, timestamps, gratuity lines, room number partially visible at the top. From where I stood, maybe 15 feet away, I could see Hannah's face tilt just slightly. That polished smile she used at work flickered on like a reflex. She didn't even look at the contents for more than a heartbeat before slipping the whole thing into her clutch. Smooth and silent. She said something to the manager I couldn't catch, then turned toward the hallway where people were starting to hang coats and grab drinks. She caught my eye, just for a second. Enough to flash a smile, raise her brows as if to say, "Can you believe how busy it is?" Then she vanished into the crowd like nothing happened. I didn't move. Couldn't. I stared at the spot she'd just been standing. The manager had already turned and walked off in another direction. Nobody else had noticed because why would they? On the surface, it was nothing. People were laughing, drinks were clinking, the projector was running loops of old clips. Me at a college football game, Hannah and I on our wedding day, that one bizarre trip to Arizona where our car broke down and we spent the night in a roadside diner talking to a waitress who claimed she'd seen aliens. Normal memories. Shared ones. But now they felt like props. I walked over to where Hannah had been and made up some excuse about checking the lighting cues. My mind was racing, trying to file what I had just seen into something that made sense. I told myself it could have been anything. Someone else's booking, a vendor's mistake, even a comped room for a late-working manager. But that excuse died quickly when I remembered something. Hannah had told me just last week that she was meeting a potential partner for a business pitch over drinks at a hotel bar. She hadn't named the hotel, but I remembered her outfit that night, deliberately striking, too much for a business pitch. She didn't come home until past 1 a.m., claiming she'd lost track of time in a really inspiring conversation about growth. I had believed her. At least I had wanted to. Back at the party, she reappeared from the hallway and drifted back to my side like nothing was off. "Everything going okay?" I asked, keeping my tone even. She smiled. "Yeah, just had to double-check something with the manager. They accidentally handed me a card from another event, I think. Some weird booking error. Don't worry about it." I nodded slowly. "Okay. Weird timing, though. Right?" she said, already reaching for a flute of Prosecco from a passing tray. "I told them they've got to keep their events separate or they're gonna ruin someone's anniversary." She sipped, eyes already scanning the room for someone else to greet. She wasn't nervous, not visibly, but something about her was just too ready, too smooth, the kind of lie that comes rehearsed. For the next 20 minutes, I played host. I shook hands, accepted hugs, posed for photos I barely smiled in. But every time my eyes caught hers from across the room, I felt that cold, crawling sense again. Something was wrong. And worse, it had been wrong for a while. The jazz trio kicked into their third set. More people arrived. Laughter rose and echoed through the old rafters. The bartender mixed whiskey sours in rapid succession, and a slideshow of photos played across the screen. Moments from childhood to adulthood, from messy high school haircuts to quiet anniversaries. Hannah and I were in most of them. We looked like the couple people envied, stylish, affectionate, stable. But I couldn't stop replaying that moment. The keycard, the hotel name, the receipt, her reaction. My stomach churned, but I buried it under small talk and group selfies. People were happy. Couldn't make a scene. Not here. Not yet. Even when my brother finally arrived and clapped me on the back like we hadn't seen each other in a year, I felt distant, numb. I was smiling, but not really there. Later, in a quiet moment near the back staircase, I found the venue manager refilling her water from the staff cooler. I asked her, as casually as I could, if there'd been confusion with another event that night. She looked at me, puzzled. "Not really," she said. "Just your booking tonight. We had a small meeting yesterday, but that wrapped in the morning." I nodded, thanked her, and walked away. There it was again, a hole in the story. The receipt I saw in Hannah's hand was from last night. Breakfast for two. I leaned against the wall and stared at the peeling poster beside me. A faded ad for a Shakespeare revival that ran back in March. The quote at the bottom hit me in a strange way. "All the world's a stage. Yeah. And some of us are just props in someone else's performance." I rejoined the crowd and kept playing my part. But in the back of my mind, a voice had started whispering, low, relentless, certain. "This isn't nothing. This is the beginning." After the incident with the keycard, everything changed, even though nothing had changed yet, if that makes sense. The celebration kept going like nothing had happened. Music swelled, people danced, old friends caught up over drinks, and the projector kept looping photos of a life I thought I understood. But in my head, things were unraveling fast. I wasn't present anymore. I was floating just above it all, watching her, watching myself, replaying things I'd pushed aside for months, maybe longer. And it was terrifying how fast those memories came flooding back. How easily they clicked together like puzzle pieces I hadn't realized were part of the same box. One thought kept echoing in my head. I should have seen this sooner. Take the investor meetings, for example. They started maybe 8 or 9 months ago. Late nights out, always under the banner of networking. She said she was chasing independent funding for a startup she wanted to build. Some sort of wellness brand that blended tech and therapy. She spoke with passion about it, and I supported her. Hell, I was proud of her for dreaming bigger. But the meetings happened more and more often. Tuesday nights, sometimes Fridays, even the occasional Sunday brunch. She always came home tired but energized, like she'd been performing rather than working. And when I asked how it went, the answers were vague. "Great vibe," she'd say. "Good potential." No details. No names. No follow-ups. Back then, I chalked it up to being secretive about early-stage deals. Now I wondered who the actual investor was, or if there ever were any. And then there was her phone. It used to be an open book, left face up on the kitchen island or bathroom counter. I knew her passcode. We played Spotify on it together during breakfast. But something shifted. Around the same time as the investor nights, she started setting it face down. Then it got a new passcode. Then she took to answering texts in another room. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe she was just being more protective with work contacts or clients. But I knew better now. No one protects business contacts like their nuclear launch codes. No one laughs nervously and says, "It's just easier this way," when you ask why their phone suddenly has a fingerprint lock and no notifications. Then there were the showers. Quick ones. Right after she came home from those meetings. Like clockwork. Not luxurious unwinds, but 10-minute disappearances with the door locked. Once or twice, I even heard the sound of a small bag being unzipped just before the water started. A makeup pouch, maybe. I asked once if everything was okay, and she just stared at me like I'd insulted her. Like the question itself was a betrayal. I let it go. I always let it go. And then the clothes. That one was harder to ignore. Hannah had always been stylish, but over the past several months, she stopped dressing for comfort or even trend. She started dressing to be noticed. Bold colors, Heels more often than flats. Lipstick every time she left the house, even just to run errands. New lingerie, pricey, boutique pieces that never made their way into our bedroom. I complimented her once, told her she looked great in this dark green wrap dress. She smiled and said, "It's not really for anyone. I just like how it feels." But that wasn't the kind of smile you gave to your husband. It was one you gave to someone else. Someone whose opinion you were still trying to earn. I'm ashamed to admit I believed her. I wanted to. Other little details rose up from the depths of my memory like debris after a shipwreck. The gym membership she signed up for across town, conveniently near the boutique hotel district. She said it was a better facility, had newer equipment. I offered to go with her once. She shut it down immediately, said she preferred to work out alone. I remember how she'd come home sweaty but with hair too perfect, eyeliner not even smudged. Once, I noticed a faint streak of lipstick wiped hastily from her jawline. She blamed it on the fruit smoothie she had afterward. I laughed. She didn't. And then the taxi receipts. That one took longer to piece together. A few months back, I got an alert from our joint account about an unfamiliar ride charge. When I asked her, she told me it was a trip she took after a business dinner because her phone died and she couldn't order her own ride. But when I opened the receipt, the destination was one of those downtown hotels. The same one where she supposedly had her meetings. The time? Just after 11 p.m. She said they ended late and she was exhausted. But when I asked who she went with, she fumbled. Now, the receipt flashed in my mind like an overdue warning light. There had been more than one of them, all to the same place. Even the way she destroyed flowers started to make sense. Hannah used to love flowers. Dried them, pressed them into books, made her own arrangements. But sometime this past year, she began throwing them away the minute they arrived. I'd see a delivery box with a florist's logo, and within minutes, the card was gone and the flowers were stuffed into the kitchen trash like they were dangerous. She'd always mutter something like, "Wrong delivery," or, "They got the name wrong." But why were there so many wrong deliveries? Always with white roses, her favorite. I never thought to press. I didn't want to be the jealous husband accusing his wife of secrets over some petals and a ribbon. But I should have asked. I should have asked every single time. And then, the calendar blocks. I'd almost forgotten those. We shared a Google Calendar. She used to fill in notes like therapy or errands or girls' night, even if I didn't need to know. But slowly they started disappearing. Instead, whole evenings were marked simply as busy. No context. No reminder alerts. Just a gray box that said, unavailable. When I teased her about how mysterious she was getting, she laughed it off and said I was being dramatic. "You don't need to know every detail of my life," she told me once. "Don't be so codependent." Back then, it stung. Now it was chilling. Every breadcrumb I had ignored was now reassembling itself into a trail I couldn't unsee. And it all pointed to something or someone that had been there right under my nose. I sat alone at the edge of the green room backstage, where the jazz trio had taken a break. My name was still on the marquee outside. My guests were still sipping drinks in the velvet seats, chatting about old times. But my head was somewhere else entirely, trapped in a loop of replayed scenes and broken trust. I thought of our wedding vows. I thought of the way she used to say my name when she was tired and leaning into me on the couch, half asleep. I thought of our first apartment, where we made toast on a broken stove and laughed at nothing. And I thought of how all of that had slowly been replaced by silence, distance, secrets. My heart wasn't broken. Not yet. But it was no longer whole. It was watching, waiting, collecting evidence like a lawyer building a case. And whether I wanted to or not, I knew what was coming. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. By the time the clock crept toward midnight, most of the crowd had thinned. The older guests left first, coworkers, a couple of my professors, even my aunt and uncle who made the drive from Bend. Their goodbyes were warm but quick, arms heavy with coats and leftover cake boxes. That left a smaller circle. The ones who lingered, college friends. A few of Hannah's coworkers I only sort of knew. The DJ. And her. She was across the room near the booth, Still talking to that guy from her marketing agency, Lucas. Tall, too confident. I'd met him once or twice. He was the kind of guy who always greeted you like you were late to your own meeting. They were close enough to hear each other over the music, but not touching. Still, something about their body language set my teeth on edge. Her stance was too relaxed. His smile too private. I turned away, told myself I was spiraling again. Paranoia makes you see ghosts in shadows. I'd read that somewhere. But I also read body language. And hers was telling me everything she wouldn't say out loud. I needed air. I stepped out into the hallway behind the stage, just to breathe, just to get away from the noise. I passed by the DJ setup on the side table, an old laptop hooked up to a small console. The playlist was looping the final set, some ambient down-tempo stuff, familiar enough to fade into the background, distant enough to ignore. That's when her phone lit up. It was face up, lying carelessly next to a pack of gum and a charger. I paused. I shouldn't have looked. I didn't go through her phone. That was a line I promised myself I'd never cross. But tonight had already redrawn all the lines. I glanced around. No one was near. The corridor was empty. Then I looked at the screen. Just a flash, a notification banner. But it was enough. Lucas. Room still smells like your perfume. I keep replaying last night. Let me know when we can sneak away again. After the toasts? Image attachment. I stared at the message. Timestamp. 10:41 p.m. My hands turned cold. I didn't touch the phone. Didn't need to. The preview had already laid it bare. My brain screamed for a rational explanation. Maybe it was a joke, maybe a trap, maybe some kind of gross misunderstanding. But I knew better. I knew her. I knew Lucas's name wasn't new. He'd come up before, only in passing, only in context. He'd helped her with pitch decks. He covered for her at work dinners. He once borrowed our car when his broke down. She had told me all of it. None of it felt strange at the time. Now it was damning. I swallowed hard, stared at the photo icon on the message. The image wasn't visible, just that generic thumbnail. But I didn't need to see it. The message said everything. The perfume, the room, the phrase again. There was no more room for imagination. No more trying to reinterpret clues as coincidences. This wasn't a breadcrumb. It was the whole loaf. I felt a strange calm settle over me, like something finally clicked into place. Not relief, not anger, just clarity. That inner voice I'd been pushing down for months was finally justified. Not just suspected, not just feared, proven. It didn't end there. Another notification popped up while I stood frozen. Lucas. Blocked off Friday too. Let's use the same suite. For 18. Got the key already. Suite 418. My birthday was Saturday. She told me she needed Friday night to prep things with the venue team. A late logistics meeting downtown. She'd even said not to wait up. Could have screamed. I didn't. Instead, I turned back toward the hallway, my legs moving on muscle memory. I passed the snack table, ignored the group calling my name, and found my way backstage, where her laptop was still hooked up to the projector. I had an idea. One I hated myself for even thinking, but I needed to know. I couldn't live in limbo anymore. The laptop was open. No password prompt. Just her documents folder minimized. The playlist still looping. I clicked open the browser. Her email was still logged in. I didn't hesitate. Not this time. The inbox was a war zone of deception. I found hotel confirmations. Multiple ones. Bookings under fake names. Messages forwarded from a burner address. Emails titled "Same time next week" and gym entry receipts. Some of them had attached PDFs, taxi receipts, OpenTable confirmations, even clothing delivery invoices to locker pickup locations I'd never heard of. She hadn't just cheated. She'd systematized it. I dug deeper. Her cloud storage was accessible too. One folder, buried 3 levels deep, was simply titled Accounts. Inside were *TS, booking confirmations from that same boutique hotel, restaurant selfies with a blurred background, a handful of mirror photos in a robe I didn't recognize. One even had Lucas's hand in the frame. It was cropped, but unmistakably his. I copied everything to a flash drive I carried on my keychain. I didn't know why I'd brought it. Maybe part of me had suspected tonight would go sideways. Or maybe I'd known for months and just needed the right push. Then I opened Excel. I created a table. For columns. Date, cover story, actual activity proof. I filled in everything I could. The yoga retreat that was actually a spa staycation. The investor dinner that aligned with Lucas's forwarded itinerary. The night she said she was at her sister's but was actually logged into Wi-Fi at the Kimpton downtown. The pattern was horrifying. Not just the frequency but the efficiency. She hadn't made mistakes. She'd planned this out like a second job. Lies stacked on top of lies, cross-referenced with fabricated appointments and decoy texts. I almost admired the dedication. Almost. I printed the spreadsheet using the Backstage printer. Black and white but clean. I added **TS of the messages. Copied the images into a second doc. I didn't include everything, just enough. Enough to make denial impossible. Enough to strip away ambiguity. I slipped the pages into an empty folder from the stage manager's desk. Labeled it simply, Hannah Fax. Then I went back out into the theater. The lights were dimmer now. The final song was playing. Guests clapped. Someone handed me a drink for a last toast. I took it without drinking. Hannah came to my side, beaming. Her arm slid around my back. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "You did good tonight. Everyone loved it." I looked at her, at the woman I had spent the last 7 years building a life with. And for the first time in our entire marriage, I felt nothing. Not hate, not rage, just silence. The kind that comes after a storm you never saw coming, but should have. The folder stayed in my jacket pocket for the rest of the night, tucked behind my phone like a loaded round. I didn't show anyone. Not yet. I wasn't interested in spectacle or drama. Not tonight. This wasn't going to be the story where the betrayed husband flips the table and screams. Not in front of cake and candles and coworkers and old friends who still thought marriage was sacred. No, I didn't want applause. I wanted clarity. The room moved on around me. People gathered near the cake stand for final photos. Someone was trying to cue a birthday message from my parents, pre-recorded and imported into the playlist. Hannah was helping a guest find their jacket. She looked light, composed. The way someone looks when the worst part is already behind them. Maybe, for her, it was. I stayed near the stage curtain, pretending to check my phone while my eyes drifted across the floor, scanning people's faces. Everyone was smiling. Everyone but me. It wasn't denial anymore. It was detachment. After the final toast, when applause faded into quiet chatter, I made my move. I told Hannah I needed to check in with the lighting tech one last time before closing out the event. She nodded, distracted by someone handing her a gift bag. I walked back to her laptop, still logged in, still connected to everything. I pulled the flash drive from my keychain and plugged it in. I didn't need guesses anymore. I needed a clean, mapped-out record. If she was going to dismantle our life behind closed doors, I was going to open every one of them and take inventory. First, I opened her browser history, mapped dates to times, locations, repeat searches for hotels under different logins, backups from messaging apps that weren't active on her phone anymore. An entire fake account on a messaging service I didn't even recognize. Some foreign brand that claimed full encryption and no device tracking. She was smart. Too smart. But not cautious enough to log out from her own laptop on the night she thought I'd be too busy blowing out candles to notice. Next, I went into her synced cloud storage. I found folders with random names, notes for May, vendor ref, old budgets. Nothing suspicious on the surface. But inside, every file was a mislabel. Hidden in spreadsheets were **TS. Inside image folders were receipts and maps and copied texts. It was her whole shadow routine, organized, disguised, preserved. I exported everything. Then I started building the chronology. Opened a new spreadsheet. Started from the earliest record I could find. I cross-referenced hotel confirmations with her calendar entries. Dinner receipts with her claimed appointments. I noted the time, the location, and what she'd told me she was doing. The table grew row by row. January 14th. Calendar. Investor pitch downtown. Actual. Suite 418. 2 guests. In-room dining at 11:42 p.m. Proof. Hotel confirmation. Uber drop-off. Chat transcript. February 6th. Calendar. Girls' night, Julie's birthday. Actual. Reservation at Estelle's Lounge for 2 under the name Lucas H. Proof. Screensh *T of shared location. Forwarded OpenTable email. Text. Can't wait to kiss you tonight. March 19th. Calendar. Therapy plus errands. Actual. Gym check-in at 8:12 p.m. Hotel room charged under personal card at 9:03 p.m. Proof. Email confirmation, calendar route, Uber receipt, robe selfie from cloud folder. The pattern wasn't just obvious, it was obsessive. Regular rhythms. Friday nights and the occasional Thursday. Always starting with a believable premise. Self-care, social engagement, professional growth. Always ending the same way. It wasn't messy. It was practiced. The more I assembled the timeline, the more the illusion of our marriage started to fade. Everything we'd done in those months. Every dinner we shared. Every morning coffee. Every casual laugh on the couch watching reruns. Suddenly felt like I was remembering someone else's life. A well-acted play I had unknowingly performed in, never reading the full script. I kept digging. In her downloads folder was a PDF titled Full Comp Exec. Inside were notes from a presentation she had made for Lucas. Not for their agency, just for him. It wasn't business strategy. It was a calendar proposal. Weekends they could get away. Goals to make the transition more realistic. References to relocation options. She had written in bold font, Mason will take time to adjust, but clarity is kindness. Clarity is kindness. The audacity. I sat there staring at those words for a long time. I tried to feel rage, but it didn't come. There was no fire, only frost. The kind that creeps in when you finally understand that something you loved has already died, and the person who buried it never invited you to the funeral. I printed the calendar timeline and attached corroborating receipts. The cloud folder images I sorted into subfolders. Dates labeled, times verified. I only kept the ones that mattered. No nudity, no drama, just facts. Concrete timestamps. Undeniable records. Then I opened her email and composed a draft. Not to send, just to document. Subject line. Record for clarity. Body. The following entries represent discrepancies between reported activities and actual movements or communications. This is not a confrontation, only a record. A mirror held up to 2 timelines. I attached the spreadsheet and the folder of files. I didn't send it. I saved it to the flash drive, pulled it out and closed the laptop. Backstage was quiet. The techs were rapping chords. One of the staff had already started sweeping. I stepped out again. The theater lights were down to a dim amber. The last group of guests were saying goodbye. Hannah stood near the doorway, chatting with one of our neighbors about some garden party next month. She looked radiant, controlled. Her mask hadn't slipped all night. She turned to me and smiled like nothing had happened, like she hadn't committed a year's worth of deception with surgical precision and still had the nerve to call it complex. I didn't confront her. Instead, I walked to the bar and got a bottle of water. I sat down in the second row, watching the screen fade to black as the projector loop ended. I waited until the guests were gone, until the music stopped, until the only sound was the hum of lights and the faint rustle of staff packing up. Then I walked to the venue administrator, same woman who'd handed Hannah the keycard earlier, and handed her the folder I had labeled in Sharpie, event record. She looked at it, confused. You want me to store this? No, I said. I want you to hold it until the slideshow starts again. You'll know when. She hesitated but nodded. I walked back to the middle of the theater, stood in the aisle and looked at the stage. Hannah was texting. I wondered if it was him. Then I looked away, breathed in slowly, and counted backward from 10. Everything was ready. It was the kind of silence that only a room full of people can make. A low hum of anticipation right before the applause, the hush before someone says something they can't take back. I stood just inside the wings of the stage, half-shadowed, watching the projector flicker back to life. The looping slideshow had finished minutes ago, and the staff had queued up a new title slide per my request. A simple transition, smooth and unassuming. The guests who remained, maybe 20 or so, sat scattered across the first few rows, sipping the last of their drinks, legs crossed, voices low. They thought this was the finale, a sweet, personal sign-off. Just another closing touch to what looked like a perfect evening. But this wasn't a celebration anymore. It was a controlled ending. I had rehearsed nothing. I didn't need to. The screen turned from black to white. Then the new title appeared, plain and unstyled, typed in a familiar font. The same one Hannah had used on our wedding invitations. The Mason and Hannah story. A year in review. Some people chuckled, expecting more photos. A sappy, nostalgic finish. Another montage of filtered moments and dim lighting. But then the subtitle appeared. Smaller, motionless. A single line, centered, set in silence. On my birthday, my wife destroyed our marriage. Then I did what shocked everyone. No music played. No images. No transition. Just text. And then, the screen went black again. Not glitchy. Not rushed. Deliberate. I stood at the edge of the stage and watched the shift ripple through the room like a slow, creeping draft. First, no one moved. It took a moment for people to register what they'd read. I heard one woman in the third row whisper, "Wait, what?" Hannah, standing halfway down the aisle, tilted her head slightly toward the screen. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her hand hovered just above her phone. Then she turned slowly and looked for me. I walked onto the stage. No microphone, no spotlight. I didn't need either. I simply walked to the projector stand at the front, turned to the administrator standing beside it, and handed her a second folder, the one I had compiled backstage. Sealed, labeled, time-stamped. She stared at it, confused, then looked at me. "Please deliver this to her," I said, nodding toward Hannah. The woman hesitated. "Are you sure you want?" "I'm sure." She took it, stepped off the stage, and walked calmly toward Hannah. Everyone watched. Even the bartenders froze. I could feel the air compress around me. Not tense, not angry, just aware. People weren't sure if they were about to witness a breakdown or a performance. No one quite knew what to do, except me. I stepped down from the stage, crossed the room, and walked toward the double doors. Not in a hurry, not flustered, just done. Hannah was still standing mid-aisle, the folder now clutched in both hands. She hadn't opened it yet. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. No tears, no rage, just confusion tinged with the sharp realization that the script had flipped. For once, she wasn't directing the scene. I walked past her without speaking. A few people turned to look, then quickly looked away, unsure if they were supposed to say something. One of her coworkers, Kelsey, I think, muttered, "Wait, Mason?" But I didn't stop. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. This wasn't a meltdown. It was a handoff. Out in the hallway, the air felt colder. The exit door buzzed slightly as I pushed it open and stepped into the quiet night. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. There was no part of me still hoping she'd run out after me, yelling my name. That version of the story had died hours ago, buried beneath receipts, timestamps, and calculated betrayals. The street outside was mostly empty. Just a couple walking their dog and a Lyft driver checking his phone. I pulled my coat tighter and kept walking. I didn't feel victorious, just clear. It's hard to describe the kind of clarity that arrives after a long, slow disintegration. It's not a thunderclap or a flameout. It's a whisper that becomes a roar only when you stop talking over it. That's what this was. Hannah's betrayal didn't hit me like a truck. It bled me dry, drip by drip, until the part of me that cared about her opinion finally ran empty. By the time I reached the corner, my phone buzzed. "Hannah, what was that? What are you doing? Why would you do this tonight?" I ignored it. Then another came through. "Come back. We need to talk. This isn't okay. Not here." Not like this. Still, I didn't respond. I stopped at the light, stared across the street at the neon glow of a coffee shop still open past midnight. Could have gone inside. I could have answered. I could have done what I'd done for months. Paused, doubted myself, left space for her version of the truth. But I didn't. Instead, I turned off my phone. Not airplane mode. Not silent. Off. Then I slipped it into my pocket like a weight I didn't need to carry anymore. The walk back to my car was long enough to think but short enough not to spiral. When I reached it, I opened the door and sat there in the driver's seat for a while, hands resting on the steering wheel. The folder I gave the venue manager contained everything. The spreadsheet, the screensh *TS, the timeline. No threats. No public humiliation. Just reality. The plainest kind of evidence, laid out with quiet precision. Anyone could read it and know exactly what it meant. But that wasn't the real shock. The real shock was that I didn't fight her. I didn't scream. I didn't beg for an explanation. I simply walked away. That's what people didn't expect. The quiet ending. The reversed narrative. The man who didn't collapse or cling or lash out, but instead documented the truth and made a clean exit. Control wasn't about vengeance. It was about refusing to let someone else define your story. Back in the theater, I imagined Hannah trying to explain. People asking questions she hadn't rehearsed for. No punchline. No pretty bow. Just a file full of dates and facts and the unmistakable echo of someone who finally saw through the fog. The image didn't comfort me. It didn't hurt me either. It just was. By the time I turned the key and started the engine, the dashboard clock read 12:38 a.m. My birthday was officially over. And so was my marriage. The next morning, I laid every printout on the table. No confrontation, no speeches. I handed a duplicate folder to my lawyer, blocked our joint accounts, and moved essentials to a storage unit. I secured all shared devices and changed every password. The divorce wasn't rage, it was method. My emotions were done. Now it was just a process, executed with precision. 2 days later, Hannah claimed she was helping a friend move, but her GPS traced directly to the same hotel. I followed, photographed her arrival, room entry, and receipts. That evening, I handed the package to my attorney. She didn't know it yet, but the divorce papers were already filed. No scenes, no final words, just a time-stamped goodbye.